10 years ago, it's like insanely complicated. So many sob stories on Reddit, how people lost their coins because basically you had to invent your own self-custody solution. Today, you can just get a hardware wallet. If you're talking about like large sums and you want to keep them secure, there's a thing called the Glacier Protocol, basically step-by-step instructions. I think it's about 100 pages. We actually don't know any capital gains taxes, so that's a plus too. There's a strong narrative that investing in Bitcoin companies is better than holding Bitcoin, which is obviously not true in my opinion. With the taxes, I think it's more probably just a bureaucracy thing, because if you have to list every coffee purchase on your tax return, that just sucks. That doesn't make any sense, because if you have Bitcoin on an exchange, it's basically useless. It's not even a form of money. It's just like some sort of an investment. Everything you build in layers. There's absolutely no point in cramming everything into layer one. All that could have gone horribly wrong, but it didn't. It was like a lot of, not hindsight, but really like thinking into the future and just nailing it. That's unbelievable for me.
Before we get started with all the topics, maybe for the few people that don't know you, who are you? Why are you excited about Bitcoin?
So I'm Stadicus, at least online, my alter ego. One of the co-founders of BitBox. We're a Swiss hardware wallet company, or as I like to call us, like an open source company, because everything we do is out in the open. Everything is open source. And we are a very boring, unregulated, nothing to see, please move along, electronics manufacturer. So this is what we are building. We want to build freedom technology for Bitcoin, for self-custody, trust minimized, open for everybody to validate on their own.
Yeah, I always forget you're from Switzerland, like the Bitcoin country. For me, it's like it would be my plan B if Europe and the European Union gets crazy. Like Switzerland is like almost like Austria without the EU. For me.
Okay, yeah, I would say Zurich, but the largest city in Switzerland, is probably more Bitcoin focused, while Zug, the crypto valley, is more like the host of the Ethereum Foundation and all the other altcoin stuff, but we're based in Zurich, so
yeah, I think it's just what it's worth. I think it's just cool to have in the middle of Europe, Switzerland, where they like, I don't care what they promote and not promote, but like at least they let innovation and Bitcoin happen. You know? It's always like if you let innovation happen, yeah, you probably also attract a lot of crypto and Web3 things, but you kind of have to ignore that. At least Bitcoin can prosper in the country, and I think that's really cool to see in Switzerland.
Definitely. I guess low taxes also help, especially for the foundations. But there's a healthy, like, free market, even when it comes to taxes and like money and all that stuff. So I think it's good to see what can bring the most value to consumers.
Yeah, I think most people are not aware, like Switzerland is a pretty small country, but in the Switzerland, there's certain regions and they have different tax codes, and it's fascinating to see.
Yeah, Switzerland is very decentralized. So I think Bitcoin really fits well, like 26 cantons for just 8 or 9 million people with different legislation, almost like the states in the US. Of course, they are way bigger. Different school laws, different tax regulation. And yeah, it keeps us fit and really limits government overreach.
Absolutely, yeah. But let's get started with self-custody. And I'm always shocked, and I told you that beforehand, I'm very focused on self-custody. I'm only holding in self-custody. As soon as I get Bitcoin on some non-self-custody way, which is barely happening these days because I earn in Bitcoin. So like I almost don't have to buy Bitcoin these days. So I don't even touch the exchanges. I always try to move it directly to self-custody or some hot wallet or like some kind of things that I can do. Why do you think so many people aren't still in self-custody? And yeah, like as I said in the beginning, the poll that I always do is like around 50% of my audience is still not in self-custody, even though I'm so focused on it. Why do you think most people still haven't gotten to self-custody, and how can we like move more people to that future?
I think most people probably start out with just buying some Bitcoin on an exchange, and the next step of actually withdrawing the Bitcoin is, of course, not really promoted by exchanges. So it takes a while until you, and interest, also a bit of knowledge and about the why you should do that. And for me, it's actually a pretty easy sell, because once people realize that Bitcoin as money has like these unique properties, it's a bearer asset, it's trustless, no third-party risk, it's censorship resistant, nobody can tell you what to do or what not to do. But you basically lose all these properties if you hold the Bitcoin on an exchange. Then it's just like another account on a bank. And maybe even worse, because banks are pretty well regulated and funded, and most of the exchanges are more of a Wild West style company. Not all, of course. I guess in Switzerland, Germany, we have also Austria, we have quite reputable companies. But if you then just go to like FTX, had they were a Super Bowl sponsor, they had like huge political influence, and still it's just like house of cards. So you can get rid of all that by just holding your own coins. And I think it's never been easier like today. I mentioned before, BitBox is now 10 years old, which is like, for me personally, an amazing achievement in a space that has changed so much. We're still around and going strong. And I think when I think back 10 years ago, it's like insanely complicated. So many sob stories on Reddit, how people lost their coins, because basically you had to invent your own self-custody solution. Today, you can just get a hardware wallet. Of course, you should get a reputable one, and that's all it takes. It's really not that complicated.
By the way, do you have any data on how many Bitcoiners actually have self-custody? I guess 50% is probably way too high, because like this is people that actually watch a Bitcoin channel online. I have heard, I think like last Bitcoin Prague conference, I heard someone talking about like 2 to 5%, which seemed very low for me. I don't know what the actual data is.
No, I don't have any strong insights. To be honest, we don't even know how many of our own customers keep what coins and how much of them, of course. We're a very privacy focused company, and it's hard to guess. I would assume that especially this, or maybe even last year, the overall volume has probably gone down with all the ETFs, with all the MicroStrategy stuff, with like the institutions coming in huge sums. But I think that's only one aspect. What I care about is that we're a B2C company. We are producing consumer products, not for institutions or for companies. And for me, this is the real metric, the decentralized aspect of spreading the coins in the population, so everybody can hold their own coins. And I think just the number of individual wallets, regardless how much or how little Bitcoin they hold, I think that's probably something we should promote. But it's really hard to estimate how large that percentage is.
Yeah, it's true. It's also, I think like around 70% of the Bitcoin are still held by individuals. So not only like 70% of the wallets, but like actually the 70% of the volume of Bitcoin, which is quite high. And so I disregard these days the danger of like people relying just on institutions, and all the Bitcoin will be just held by institutions, and people will just have the IOU. I think there is a small chance of that happening, but right now there's no indication for that. But maybe when we move more in this, I see that big cycle that we have now of like institutional adoption, but retail is kind of sleeping still. We have like a little bit of less retail interest when you look at YouTube search volume, when you look at Google search volume, when you look at all the volumes that you can compare to 2017, 2021. Do you see some danger in institutions really kind of not taking over, but like getting more and more of the market share, and this small individual bubble kind of swapping over to exchanges and ETFs and whatever?
Hard question. I don't have a crystal ball. I think there's a strong narrative that investing in Bitcoin companies is better than holding Bitcoin, which is obviously not true in my opinion. I'm kind of open to that when these companies actually are working for Bitcoin, like they are like giving back, they're producing something valuable, like creating new interesting technology or services, things like that, make Bitcoin more useful. For example, just in the US, every Bitcoin transaction is a taxable event, right? So it's really hard to spend Bitcoin in a non-illegal way. So many Bitcoiners borrow against their Bitcoin, which I think is a valid way of using your Bitcoin stack. But if companies just are basically just like money bags, I don't really find that too interesting. And for me, at the heart, as I mentioned, like Bitcoin and BitBox, especially, I think it's really freedom technology. And this is something we really need to work to keep, to not like let other narratives like greed and yield and all that stuff that seems to come out of nothing to take over and like work against self-custody.
I think spending is really important, like spending Bitcoin, Definitely. Like actually using the Bitcoin somehow. And obviously there are the people just like, they have a fiat income. They don't want to spend any because they have like their, they just want to stack more Satoshis and that's perfectly fine. But there are also people that, even when they want to spend something off their stack, they borrow against it or they do something else with that. And I think spending Bitcoin is something underrated. And I'm curious on what you think about that. I think the taxes actually should not hold someone back, because if you have a situation where you are 90% on Bitcoin and you spend the 10% of fiat, you can spend the 10% of fiat without taxes, obviously. If you then go ahead and convert those remaining 10% to 100% Bitcoin, then you have to spend your Bitcoin, obviously. And then you also have to pay capital gains tax when you make a profit. But that's the point. You only pay capital gains tax if you make profits on those 10%. So holding fiat is ultimately worse, because when you hold Bitcoin, you only pay something if you are better off than holding fiat. So for me, the taxes is like, it's anyways just if you made profit from that. So yeah, of course it sucks that you have to pay taxes. Like I'm not a friend of taxes. I'm very much against taxes, but it's still better than holding fiat.
True. I think the main, so I'm a huge like spend and replace guy. I just have a standing order buying a bit of Bitcoin every month, and I know I can spend it. I mean, I don't spend like huge sums, but I spend freely, and I know sometimes over the month I'll get a bit more. Sometimes I get less, but it's always a positive amount that I add to my stack with spend and replace. And that has also become a lot easier with non-custodial exchanges that send you the Bitcoin directly to your wallet. So just have a standing order, and then you can just start spending Bitcoin when you feel like it. With the taxes, I think it's more probably just a bureaucracy thing, because if you have to list every coffee purchase on your tax return, that just sucks. That doesn't make any sense. And I guess nobody should do that, or should need to do that. And I really hope that some sort of like a minimal amount that is not taxable will be established in the US at some point.
I hope so. I also hope that it comes to Europe. It's like, I mean, in Germany, I don't know actually how it's in Switzerland, but in Germany, you have the rule if you hold it longer than 1 year, they're tax-free. In Austria, the rule is unfortunately no longer there, but it's all still there for people that bought Bitcoin. What is the date? February 2021? Might be wrong. Maybe it's February 2022, something like that. So the Bitcoin you bought before that. How's it in Switzerland? You pay for every transaction?
No, we actually don't know any capital gains taxes, so that's a plus too.
Wait, Switzerland has no capital gains tax at all?
We do have a wealth tax, but it's like 0.01 whatever percent, just like once per year. At the end of the year, what you own, is taxed, but that has nothing to do if you spend or the Bitcoin or not.
You make Switzerland more attractive already. Like every time I talk with someone from Switzerland, I'm like, oh shit, like I'm in the wrong mountain village. Yeah, but yeah, there's also some apps that make it easier, I guess, with the taxes.
Definitely.
I personally don't use any of those, but I heard of some interesting things where you just like plug in the public address and then they're like, oh, like here's what you owe in taxes, and this is the report, and you can do it easily. But yeah,
but the one thing you mentioned, that like actually spending Bitcoin or using Bitcoin is important. I think that also comes down to or leads back to self-custody, because if you have Bitcoin on an exchange, it's basically useless. It's not even a form of money. It's just like some sort of an investment, because nobody can pay you. You cannot pay anyone. You can withdraw into your own wallet, but then again, you need a harder wallet if the sum is large enough. It's basically just useless rock, like shiny rock, like gold, without all the cool stuff that Bitcoin offers on top of that. So self-custody is the only way to actually use Bitcoin as money.
And there are even some exchanges that don't where you cannot withdraw. I think Robinhood and N26 in Austria, definitely I know. So there's some places where you can buy Bitcoin and you're trapped.
Yeah,
you have to sell it again.
That's definitely not what it was meant to be.
Absolutely.
And when I think back like 10 years when the first BitBox 01, it was called Digital BitBox, came to market, that was like a very different place, obviously. And I know that when I wasn't in the team back then, but that was like just two guys, Jonas Schnelli and our CEO, Douglas Beckham. They basically invented a hardware wallet from scratch, basically at the same time as Trezor, but even before Ledger came out with their first device. And back then, nobody knew what a hardware wallet actually should do or should offer. So none of these devices had a screen. And of course, this is also what led to like iterations and improvements in hardware. So self-custody really became a lot more secure and a lot easier over the last years.
How was the time? I'm really curious because like I never actually researched how it was in the early days to self-custody. I had some guests on that talked about how hard it was to buy Bitcoin even, and some crazy stories where you had to meet some shady guy in some coffee shop to like get some Bitcoin because there was not really exchanges. So that was interesting to hear. How was it to like self-custody the Bitcoin? We also hear a lot of stories of like how people lost their Bitcoin in the early days.
I don't have like that much first-hand experience in these very olden days, but of course, then you basically had, if you're talking about like large sums and you want to keep them secure, there's a thing called the Glacier Protocol, basically step-by-step instructions. I think it's about 100 pages. That you need to buy like two identical laptops. You need to like manually remove the network card, the Wi-Fi card, everything is in duplicate. It's like hours and hours of like gutting the laptop just to get some sort of a secure air-gapped device. And still, it's so easy to fuck up because at some point, of course, you still need to communicate with the outside world. And AirGap, as it is used often as a marketing gimmick, is basically just that. It's not really that much of a security benefit because communication still happens. And if you use USB sticks or SD cards or all that stuff, things can leak, keys can get outside of your secure enclave. And that's best practice back then. most, of course, didn't do that and just held it on their regular computer, or on their phone, or on MTGOX as one of the first exchanges before it just went bust. So many coins were lost back then because there just wasn't like any off-the-shelf proven product that has been like built upon the experience of like actual users and standardized with things that you can recover in a way that is not like invented by yourself.
Interesting. And how has it been then kind of developed from there? I think the BitBox came out, like, as you said, 10 years ago, quite a long time ago. And how has it been like developed over the years?
So the first BitBox 01 didn't have a screen, but it did have a mobile app as a two-factor authenticator. Basically, you had to check, because if you have a signing device like a hardware wallet, of course, it should not sign Bitcoin transactions blindly. This is where all these credit card things already fall on their faces, because if you cannot check what you're actually signing, you're 100% trusting the host device, which is actually not exactly the point not to do.
Is that the BitBox one?
Exactly. Nice. That brings back a lot of memories. But we had a mobile app which was paired with the BitBox 01, and you can actually like check what you're signing on your phone. So that was already quite a good security. But of course, today we expect a hardware wallet to have a screen. It's just like best practice, and I would never use one that doesn't have a screen. So if you go to the BitBox 02, of course, comes with a screen. It still has the micro SD card backup, which is really nice because it allows you to set up the BitBox in just a few minutes without actually going through all the hassle, at least in the beginning, to write down all the recovery words. So you can do it with a friend without seeing the words or you leaving the room for 10, 20 minutes. Of course, you still have the option to write the recovery words down later, and we also recommend that. But just to get started, we have a speed run on Twitter. We set up a BitBox 02 in under 1 minute, including backup, and you're ready to go. So that's really nice.
Just a side question: what is the importance actually of a Bitcoin only edition of a hardware wallet? Is it just to like block out the noise of the hardware wallet for users?
That's certainly part of it. So the BitBox 01 was a multi-edition. It already supported Ethereum and other things. Of course, back then there was not a lot else. But as I mentioned, Jonas Schnelli, one of the main Bitcoin Core maintainers, was a co-founder of the original BitBox company. And for him, it was always a very important thing to also make a Bitcoin-only device. And with the BitBox 02, we actually did that. And from what I see, we sell about 50-50, although they're the same hardware, just different firmware. And the Bitcoin only, which does less, doesn't cost less. It's the same price. Yet we still sell 50-50. I think most people buy it either because they want the device to be as minimal as possible, like less error, like less potential for error, or they want to gift the device to someone and they want to make sure that they not immediately search for the latest meme coin to buy. And there's also like a more theoretical security benefit because it does have less external dependencies on programming libraries, or every line of code has some sort of a theoretical potential for a bug. And if you have less code, that means less attack surface. So in theory, it's a bit more secure. But I think we're talking about a security level in general that is so high. I would classify that more as statistical noise.
It's super interesting because I only recommend Bitcoin only things to friends and family because I had it too often in the early days where I gave them just here, buy your Bitcoin, you can use any exchange, and they're like coming back with Bitcoin Cash or like coming back with Ethereum. Like that's not the thing I'm talking about. So Definitely. I'm always recommending Bitcoin only things, exchanges with hardware wallets, with anything. So I think it's an absolute like must to have just for orange pilling people. Security wise, I'm not the expert, but I can imagine, of course, I'm a software developer actually by trade. So I know less code. You have more overview of the whole thing. And it's just like every single line of code that you introduce can also introduce theoretically, as we said, a faulty thing. So like that's very true.
Exactly. And the cool thing is now then, like, I think 2019, we introduced the BitBox 02 with the screen and all the nice things. I mean, the BitBox 01 already had a USB connector, but a USB-A. So it was more meant for like desktop or laptop computers. We switched already in 2019 to the USB-C connector, which is like has proven very worthwhile because now, even today, now basically USB-C has become the standard even for iPhones. And with the male plug, you don't need an adapter. You don't need an extension cable or anything. You just plug it into your phone, into your tablet, into your laptop, and then that's all there is. So that's really nice. And of course, the BitBox 02 doesn't like it's meant from a hardware perspective. It's as simple as it gets. There are no moving parts. All the touch interface is like induction. There's no battery that can lead to a huge number of problems or like degrade over time. So it's as simple as possible, and it's just like meant to keep your coins safe and do nothing else.
I have mine since quite some time. I think since 3 years, and never made any problems. So like they're meant to last like things from Switzerland again.
Definitely. And I mean, even if you got like, we actually had a huge beta program, like hundreds of devices we gave out for free just to get initial user feedback that led to some minor, improvements, but nothing serious. For example, we swapped out the micro SD card slot for a different thing, different model. But even if you had a better device or then the first production device from 2019, you're still getting like updates today, every few months. There's no limitation. The hardware holds up really well, and this will continue. There are no plans of like phasing the BitBox 02 out because it does what it needs to do, and the hardware holds up really well. But of course, there are limits, and I mentioned the iPhone, for example. We were really happy when the iPhone switched to USB-C, but unfortunately, it's never that easy with Apple. So the BitBox 02, as we know today, is not iPhone compatible, but this will change.
It's iPhone is always a special player in the field. I have myself an iPhone, but it's always interesting when you want to do something with those things.
And I think this is what I wanted to lead towards, to that after like 6 years, there have been some hardware like requirements that we always wanted to do and that are not possible in software. For example, the BitBox 02 is made out of plastic by design, and it's slightly translucent so that the screen can show through. But of course, plastic also means that it can scratch, especially if you have it in your backpack or whatever. So a glass top or a glass screen with tempered glass has always been something we wanted to do. Of course, the iPhone compatibility is like the feature request number one. And this is why I'm very happy to say that as of basically today, we'll have the next version of the BitBox 02. It's not the BitBox 03. It's like an improvement, but not a completely new device. But we call it the BitBox 02 Nova, and it comes with some additional hardware features. And if you want, I would be very happy to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe also you probably have some pictures that you can show us and
I don't have, maybe you have some pictures I didn't prepare, but I actually have a proper device.
That's even better.
That's probably even better. So you see that it's actually, I'm not an influencer. You see like the autofocus, but so the glass top is really nice, but otherwise it's still like the same discrete device. You don't even see that it's like something special really, but it comes like with a very nice matte finish, the glass top. And now you can just plug it into your iPhone or into the iPad and use it basically now on any device that you have that can run apps.
So like it's now compatible with iPhone. What else did change with that one?
Sorry, I didn't understand.
Just like, so like it's now compatible with the iPhone. Is there something else that changed with this device?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the glass top is really nice. We will also offer additional colors. For example, there's from the start a white version as well for people that want to have more of a sleek design, or have multiple and want to keep them apart. We also updated the security slightly, so it now features fully certified EAL6 plus security chip. So that's more of a security guarantee. But it's really more of an overhaul. But I think just the feature that you now can basically use it with any device, even iPhones and iPads, is a huge step forward, because so many people are basically using iPads now for their daily driver. And the software we build really is mobile first. So that's, I think, comes now finally to a good conclusion now that we can also support the iPhone and the iPad.
Oh, so like you even built it for being mobile first instead of being first on desktop?
I mean, the BitBox app that we, of course, is free. You can download it, and you should download it to get started and initialize the BitBox. It is built with, you're a software developer. It has I think a Go backend and a React Native front end. So we can basically compile it to any platform that we want. And of course, it supports Windows, it supports Mac OS for a long time. That's not something that was restricted. It supports all variants of Linux. It has been supported for Android for a long time, because this is more of an open platform. And many people actually prefer to use the BitBox on their phone or like Android tablet, because of course that comes with a touch interface and it's really nice and easy to use. And now, of course, we can also like compile it for iPhone and iPads. And now that it actually can communicate with these devices.
Interesting. By the way, a fun fact, I was actually Go and React.
Okay.
So I had to Go and React and JavaScript, and TypeScript experience in my past, but it's a long time coming.
So next time you have a feature request, I'll just ask for your pull request.
I can program it myself, yeah. No, but that would be probably a security risk for me.
This is actually a good thing, because we do from time to time accept external contributions, but it's really hard and the bar is really high, because of course you kind of trust not the software itself, but the process, and that people are actually looking at the code. Everything is in the open, but of course with every update there are changes. And for us, it's really important. You can basically check every pull request, every code change, including all the discussions that happen, that people peer review each other's contributions, also from our internal developers. It's really, really important that the code quality is very high so that it's easy to audit. And to be honest, I wouldn't want to go through our hiring process as an engineer. yeah, that's something else. And then also if you contribute code and you get criticized, and there's like so much stuff you need to change to just like get into the flow of what level of code quality is expected. That's really something I'm quite proud of, although I'm not directly involved, but it's out in the open. Everybody can look at how we work.
I never looked at that aspect if you're a software developer, because when I developed software, it was all closed source. It was not open sourced. So you're only judged by your direct manager or by the CTO or like someone above you, and maybe by some colleagues that say like, oh, like you could improve this and that. But if you're open source as an internal developer, you're judged by the whole world, basically.
Definitely.
The first time I ever made any money, I got myself from that money a watch. And ever since then, I collect timepieces to remember times where I achieved some milestone. That's why I got the Bitcoin 2025 edition when I went to my first ever American Bitcoin conference. So for me, the Bitcoin watches from Coin Vigilant represents the time that we are living in. For every person that wears a Bitcoin watch, I know they are representing sound money to the outside world. Make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. I know how big of a hurdle it can be to have self-custody, but it's so freaking important to make that first step. We have to make sure it's as easy and simple as possible. And that's exactly what BitBox did. BitBox created the simplest and the easiest hardware wallet to use to get into self-custody. So get yourself a BitBox down from the link in the description. And when you use code Robin, you even get a 5% discount. Most people realize that way too late. If you have Bitcoin, you have to have a self-custody hardware wallet. But what are you doing if that hardware wallet breaks? Yeah, you wrote your seed phrase on paper. What if that paper is just dissolving or water is spilled on top of it? Paper is very non-durable. So you have to have a fire-resistant, water-resistant, and impact-proof method of securing your seed phrase so you can back up your keys. And to do that, you should use a solid titanium plate from Stampseed. Go to stampseed.com and use code Robin to get not 5 or 10, but 15% off your Stampseed. The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They are also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. It's an interesting aspect. How important is that? Like, have you seen where like people from the outside catch something and open source really was giving very valuable feedback for BitBox?
Definitely. We do have a bug bounty program. So if that's the whole point of open source, right? So closed source might be, let's say, more efficient or easier in the short term. But if you're open source in the mid or long term, I would just claim that it's always going to result in higher quality code and more secure code, because it's not only the audits that you commission yourself from a professional company, which we did as well. We actually had 2 independent professional audits for the BitBox 02. But these are more like checking all the boxes audits or going through best practices when it comes to coding. But with Bitcoin security, most of the vulnerabilities are really thinking outside the box vulnerabilities, like the hardware wallet not enforcing some sort of a logical check, or just not understanding the protocol of BitBox enough. And with the bug bounty program and us being fully 100% open source, we encourage independent security professionals to look at our code. And if they find something, of course, they should report it to us first so that we can fix it, which has happened in the past. Nothing critical, but some things have been improved. And that's a well-established process that they report it to us in an encrypted form. We evaluate the vulnerability. We basically pay them for their efforts and for the severity of the vulnerability. And then we have 90 days to fix the code, release an update. And after that, the security researcher is free to do whatever they want to. So there's no NDA, there's no gag order or anything. They can write the blog post about it and be as loud as they want. But for fairness sake and for the security of our users, usually it's 90 days that we have time before the vulnerability is publicly disclosed.
Makes sense. Yeah, you don't want to post that publicly as much, and it's something that I came to know because I worked in IT security before. Bug bounty programs are something that is super really good. I've seen it firsthand because I personally have never done it. I have some really good friends back in the day in Munich that were part of bug bounty programs, and they just like all the bug bounty programs that are open and interesting enough for them, they just did. And they bought like the products. I can remember Daniel, shout out to Daniel. He was having the Meta classes, the Facebook classes, and he found bugs there where you can basically interject the video and can get it into the Wi-Fi because it has like an own small Wi-Fi, and he hacked into this Wi-Fi, got like a few $1,000s for finding that bug from Facebook. So bug bounty programs are, I think, like really interesting, especially with hardware devices, because I know there are a lot of even non-Bitcoiners out there that would just like to hack hardware and like to hack the software and the intersection with that. And it's a great way of incentivizing and white labeling hackers. Like if you don't have bug bounty programs, you incentivize hackers to be malicious. If you have bug bounty programs, you incentivize hackers to be good actors. So yes. I'm all about aligning incentives. Bitcoin is all about aligning incentives. So I love bug bounty programs, and it's almost a red flag if a company doesn't offer that in some regard.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's, sometimes it's really interesting that, for example, during some months, like our employee of the month was basically a 16-year-old, like from France. It was like, it's crazy that he found stuff that all the professionals just overlooked, including ourselves. Nothing serious, but, still, like, security is a process. And you need to constantly improve. Otherwise, at some point, people will find something that can, even in a most complex way, like exploit. Yet and we also do security responsible disclosures, as these are called, like between companies. So we made this to all our competitors. We made responsible disclosures and have been paid for it, and vice versa. So even in the professional Bitcoin security industry, that's a good way to collaborate without giving others like an unfair advantage or do stuff for free. But still, like, everybody is working towards the same goal, which is self-sovereignty and self-custody. So if these goals align, I think it's a no-brainer that we also act as good actors in the space and report security vulnerabilities to competitors.
Yeah, that's something I've definitely learned in the IT security space. Security is a moving target.
Definitely.
Like you never fully catch up, but you want to be as close as possible.
Yes. And it's all about making it so when somebody claims something is unhackable, either they don't know what they're talking about, or are not honest with you, or are malicious. Like, I think there are only these three options, because everything is hackable eventually if you have unlimited resources, unlimited tries. So what we with hardware wallet and hardware security are doing is to make an attack as expensive as possible with the least probability of success. So if you need to invest like 10 million into an electronics lab to hack something, and by doing so, you have a 99% chance of destroying the device and make it basically brick it and make it unusable, then that's already quite a good baseline, I would say. And then, of course, with the BitBox O2, there are not even all the secrets are on the device itself. So, for example, the user password is not stored. So even if you could theoretically extract some data from it, you still need to brute force it afterwards. So there's so many lines of defense, also with a lifetime counter and whatnot, that we call this security in depth. It's like a military term, though. If you overrun the enemy in one line, there's still like 3 more lines that can take you out. So this is our strategy, not claiming that the BitBox is unhackable. It's just like really, really good.
It's also interesting with Bitcoin itself, because of course you could theoretically hack the network, but the resources needed are impossible to gather. Okay. If I understood that correct, from my perspective, but it's like, yeah, of course, there's like a 51% attack. Yeah, theoretically, yes, it's all possible. It's so unrealistic, so improbable that it's probably the most unhackable thing on earth. And that's what I always say to people, because I get the question a lot, especially from like older people that say, oh, but like those softwares always have bugs and like they get hacked, and like, how is this with Bitcoin? Can someone just like take my money? And I always tell them, first of all, it's way more likely that you get hacked from your bank account. It's like way more unsecure. And second of all, like if you actually look deep, it's so hard to do it that you can realistically say it's impossible. But of course, there's always a black swan. There's always like a miniature event that could theoretically happen.
Potentially, yeah. But on the other hand, BitBox in itself has also probably the biggest bug bounty of the world built in, because if you hack Bitcoin, you basically have unlimited access to so much money, so that it's really worthwhile. And it has been battle tested for like 16 years now, and nobody managed to break it. So even with all the odds and the resources that you can throw at it, and the theoretical potential that things could happen, I'm not sure about cryptography if it's even theoretically possible, but at least with the 51% attack or something like that, which of course is not like really hacking. It's more like rewriting history and maybe doing some double spending, but they still cannot take your coins. But even that, it's just not feasible, because if it would be, somebody would have done it.
It's kind of magical for me. It's like, yes. How did this happen? Like, how did everything come together so perfectly that we don't know the origin, that we have the secure protocol that was in the beginning still fragile, like probably someone could have killed it in 2010, but no longer in 2025. So how did this slowly, organically grow? It's really magic. Also the best perfect time for that, where we have so much fiat history already and know that fiat is so bad and that we really need an alternative. But it's also not too late that we're already super deep into CBDCs or anything like that. It's magical.
Yeah. For me, like Bitcoin as the answer to the great financial crisis, like as a digital version of Occupy Wall Street. I think I'm still surprised that not more activists are enthusiastic about Bitcoin, because for me, it's really a freedom technology, and how the incentives that Satoshi built into the system still hold up. Like the halving, it started with 50 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. It halved every 4 years. And that kind of aligned very nicely with the growth of the network, with the value it accrued, with the profitability of the miners, etc. All that could have gone horribly wrong, but it didn't. It was like a lot of, not hindsight, but really like thinking into the future and just nailing it. That's unbelievable for me.
I know why there are no activists, because the activists are busy orange pilling their loved ones. It's yeah, of course you could go now to the street. It's like, oh, we need Bitcoin but you can just go ahead and orange pill your loved ones and orange pill your politicians, orange pill the people. I think Bitcoiners inherently understand, if you want to see a change in this world, like, first of all, be the change yourself, and then try to change your environment, try to change like your loved ones, and explain to them why Bitcoin, and also the game theory aspect. I think once you get really into Bitcoin, you're like, oh, like, yeah, it's inevitable. And when you see other activists, like for climate change and stuff like that, and that's not inevitable. Like you kind of have to fight for that. So I think that's the inherent reason, because I ask myself the question a lot. It's like, oh, like, it makes so much sense why I am not on the street. Like, I'm young, I could be on the street. I could clue myself on the street for Bitcoin. I don't know what that would do for Bitcoin, but probably nothing. Why don't do it? Yeah, because I first orange pilled my loved ones, and then everyone was kind of like either already on Bitcoin or sick of me. So I went to the online world, went on Twitter, then Twitter blobbed, then I made a podcast, and podcast blobbed. I was like, yeah, I found other outlets, and they are way more efficient in doing the same thing as an activist is trying to do. So I think that's the short answer to why there are no activists.
Interesting. Nicely put.
I mean, there's one German guy. Do you know him? That sits silent. Rabbit. That silently sits in front of the central banks and just like stands there with signs.
Yeah,
he's kind of an activist.
Definitely.
One thing more that I want to ask you, if you've seen, how long are you with BitBox and with this self-custody space already? Like, how many years?
6-7 years, I would say. Then hard to say.
Then it's really great, because let's say 5 years is like from 2020 to 2025. What have you seen in innovation in technical breakthroughs that we have done in the self-custody space that are really important for either making it more secure or making more adoption possible, making more user friendly, whatever direction you want to go with it?
I mean, for me, with Bitcoin as self-sovereignty, there are many aspects. Hardware wallets, like secure self-custody, is definitely one of the important ones. Here, I think things just got easier. Products got better. Some products also got way more complicated because of all the shenanigans and altcoins and crypto swaps and like advertising and a lot of money going into the space. This is really what we try to avoid, like build a minimal product, basically the easiest hardware wallet on the market. This is the second goal after being secure. But I would say most reputable hardware wallets are secure. So that's not really a USP, but we want to be the easiest, because I think ease of use is part of security. If you are not doing mistakes, that's also part of security. Other than that, I think the awareness on how to run your own full node has also grown a lot. I pride myself in being one of the drivers there, at least in the beginning, with my own Raspberry Bolt guide. Basically, the first guide that explained how you run Bitcoin Core, Electrum, Block Explorer, all that stuff on a Raspberry Pi. So that was very exciting, and that was also basically my first time being public in the Bitcoin space. I think that was about 2016, 2017, especially with the block size wars. That basically radicalized me towards Bitcoin full nodes. And now what I think is changing a lot is mining, home mining. People want to be part of the mining industry as well. And I think that becomes more feasible because miners are longer lasting. You don't need to change them every year because they become obsolete so quickly. And there are new solutions that are actually using the excess heat for heating, for like different things, that so it's not only about mining. You can actually use mining as one block in larger solutions. And that, of course, makes it a bit more profitable if you don't have access to the cheapest form of electricity, especially in Germany, Switzerland, where we don't really have these like super, like untapped, energy sources like hydro that is not used and stuff like that.
Yeah, this mining is fascinating. Mining was not on my radar at all till like November, and then more and more guests mentioned it, and like all the things with the BitX, with the solo mining, with Ocean, with the mining templates, what's going on. It's super cool what the Bitcoin community is doing, because I do think if we have just like 2-3 big pools that control everything, they could run into problems with like censoring transactions and stuff like that. I don't think so, but it could. So I think it's very important that we have Ocean, that we have solo mining, that we have BitXs, and that we have, how does Poppernet call it, rabbits, I think, on horses, that we have like smaller miners that do it like with like maybe 2-3 rigs at home, or maybe like have horses that have like one container that they're running, which is kind of movable, and like you can probably clean it out in one day if you really want to, and move it to a different location. So I think it's very important for the Bitcoin decentralization, because as we said with security, there's no 100% decentralization. There's always an aspect that you could theoretically attack. And the more we move towards decentralization, the more decentralized and the more secure we make Bitcoin, the better it is, like the better future-proof it is.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm an IT engineer by trade, not the most technical one, especially in our company, but I have a decent understanding of IT and security things. And for me, it was like very obvious, as I mentioned, the block size wars in information technology. Everything you build in layers. There's absolutely no point in cramming everything into layer 1, because at some point the layer 1 will break and then you're basically done. So that's like the end of the road. But this is coming back to the full node stuff. Of course, in that context, also Lightning became a lot bigger. And for me, that's also quite an important aspect of actually making Bitcoin more usable for everyday purchases. And I'm very excited about that as well. For example, with BitBox, of course, we always accepted Bitcoin payments in our own web shop. But I think we were definitely the first, and for quite a while, the only hardware wallet manufacturer that sold their products for Lightning. And it's just the best experience. We were, for example, a few years back in Bitcoin 2023 or something in Miami. And for us as a Swiss company, it's super complicated to actually sell products outside of Switzerland. Legally, we're not allowed to take credit card payments. Like cash is super cumbersome, especially if you need to take them home by plane or whatever. Bitcoin, of course, is awesome. But if you do physical transactions, like handing out the device, you theoretically would need to wait for at least for the first block confirmation to avoid like double spending or some like rerouting of the payment. And with Lightning, that was all these problems basically have been fixed. It's like Bitcoin Lightning with a proper point of sale device that even prints a receipt and everything. It's just like the most easy way of traveling around the world and selling stuff. And you just connect to your own server. It goes automatically into your accounting. And for me, that's also like a huge step forward in Bitcoin sovereignty stack.
Yeah, Lightning is awesome. We also have an integration with the BitBox. It's really cool to see Lightning work on scale, because, as I said, I'm once a month I try, and I fail most of the months, but I try to go to the Bitcoin meetups in Vienna, and they always pay for my burger, for my salad with Lightning, and it works really, really cool. It's just great to have like your phone Lightning, bam, bang, and then you have it, and it's really nice.
Definitely. Yeah, for me, that's a bit the Bitcoin freedom stack, like on-chain transaction validation, like self-custody, like payments, and then, of course, mining. I think these 4 aspects are really important.
I have one question that I asked every single guest of mine, and the question is, what can we learn from you besides Bitcoin?
I guess if you follow my Twitter, you see from time to time some nice pictures from the Swiss Alps. I never post pictures about like from people or my family, but of course they are a huge part of my life. So like being your own boss and enjoying life with the freedom that maybe Bitcoin gives you, I think is the most important aspect of being in Bitcoin.
I see here. Yes. Nice, the Alps.
Exactly.
But that's
I was
beautiful.
actually cleaning meadows for 2 days. And even repairing a digger. That was fun.
That's fun. Really cool. We
go outside and touch grass. I think if you were asking for a one line.
Go outside and touch grass. Very, very Bitcoin thing to say. Yeah. We have an intro routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest asked you the question, and almost impossible to answer question, in my opinion. What is the single most important educational resource that lit up your orange brain cells?
That's actually a very easy thing to answer. I think it's a person, and for me it was Andreas Antonopoulos. I learned a lot from him, from his ability to take a complicated question just directly from the audience and build a 10-minute explanation that is incredibly coherent, takes you on a journey, but circles back to the original question. I think he's unmatched in that regard. And I'm really thankful and happy to have met him. And he really also cut my altcoin phase very, very short.
I think that's the single most important things that Bitcoin educators can do. Cutting the altcoin phase of Bitcoin, because we all kind of have it. I mean, I see it less and less, honestly. I just mentioned it. I was in Vegas at the Bitcoin conference, and there were like a bunch of people that came in to me, and they were actually orange pilled the last 1.5 years, so in 2024 or 2025, and they actually never touched altcoins. So I think maybe we're getting to a point where education is so broad and so good and so many different formats that people get it once they get to Bitcoin content. They don't have to do the altcoin thing. And also, I don't know if it's good or bad, but we now have another distraction in Bitcoin. We have those Bitcoin treasury companies that kind of provide a better performance, like get more Bitcoin. I am not a big fan of it. And this is coming from someone like, I interviewed Michael Saylor. I was at this 100K party, and I still have never owned a single share of MicroStrategy. So I could have done it easily, but like I never owned it. I fully support what he's doing. I think he's doing a great service to the Bitcoin community in his way and for companies. But I just don't like the distraction of holding self-custody Bitcoin. And he himself says like, get Bitcoin. Like he sells MicroStrategy shares and buys Bitcoin. And then people are like, oh, like Michael Saylor, I like him. That's why I buy MicroStrategy. You know, like if you follow his advice, he says buy Bitcoin. And the point I was making is like I see more and more people that are focused on number crop technology actually going away from altcoins and moving towards IOUs of Bitcoin, like a strategy and other products. And this is really interesting to see. And I think it's a positive development where they come from altcoins, at least to the Bitcoin ecosystem, and it all trickles down anyways at some point to the Bitcoin main protocol. So we all benefit from that.
Yeah. Let's hope we don't lose them and eventually they end up at least in some sort of like sovereign Bitcoin ecosystem. Not everybody needs to hold 100% of their Bitcoin themselves, but I think everybody should have some. And if you can, and if you want to, you should have the ability to be 100% in Bitcoin, especially now with CBDCs just around the corner. For me, this is like the overarching goal of also why I am so excited about Bitcoin. I think once these like central bank digital currencies really become a reality and will be rolled out in force, and there will be a huge propaganda and flooding Bitcoin and all that stuff. I want Bitcoin to be ready to be like the opt-out coin for everybody to have.
Really cool. I think that's the perfect way to end the podcast. So thank you so much, Stadicus, for being on. Before I let you go, where can people find you, ask you questions? I think Twitter we already showed. Is this the best way to reach out to you?
Definitely Stadicus 3000 on Twitter. And of course, for the BitBox, it's bitbox.swiss is our website. We have like all the information about our products online, a great blog post where we post about security relevant things, not only about BitBox. It's definitely worth a read. And yeah, if you see us any time at a conference, be it a Bitcoin conference or a fiat conference, which we are more and more going towards to also like be present there and represent Bitcoin, come and say hi. It's always a pleasure to connect directly.
Thank you so much, Stadicus. And as always, with guests and the companies, the links are down in the description. And thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye.